You ever notice how the ones who walk closest to the truth often walk alone? How those who dare to live differently, to obey something higher than human opinion, somehow become the outcasts of their own faith. There's a group, quiet, devoted, consistent, that carries a message the world rarely understands. They don't fit in with the crowd. They don't blend with culture. They live by conviction, not convenience. And because of that, they've been labeled, laughed at, and often left out of the conversation. People say they're too strict. Others say they're obsessed with rules. But what if what we call restriction is actually revelation? What if what the world misunderstands about them is the very thing God honors in them? You see, the truth doesn't always look popular. It doesn't always sound comfortable. Sometimes it looks like a small group of people holding fast to what everyone else has forgotten. So tonight we ask the question, are Adventists the most misunderstood Christians in the world? Because if misunderstanding is the price for obedience, if rejection is the cost of standing with truth, then maybe misunderstanding isn't failure at all. Maybe it's favor in disguise. The misunderstood mission. Every divine movement begins in obscurity. It begins in the shadows of misunderstanding, where those who are called see what others cannot, hear what others will not, and walk where most refuse to go. The misunderstood mission is not about popularity, it is about purpose. When heaven plants a message inside a mortal, it is rarely met with applause. The prophets were stoned, the apostles were imprisoned, and the Son of God himself was crucified, not because they were wrong, but because they were right in a world that loved its own illusion. To be misunderstood, then, is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that you have touched something eternal. The Adventist mission was never meant to blend in. It was never designed to be comfortable or fashionable. It was born in prophecy, baptized in disappointment, and sustained by divine conviction. Imagine a group of men and women in the 1800s, standing at the edge of history, declaring that Christ was soon to return. The world laughed, the churches mocked, yet out of that ridicule rose a remnant who refused to give up hope. They didn't have prestige or wealth or worldly power. All they had was the Word of God and a conviction that burned hotter than public opinion. They were misunderstood, but they were not mistaken. When you carry a message from God, you must expect to be misread by those who live only by sight. They will judge what they cannot see. They will analyze what they cannot understand. The Adventist mission, to restore forgotten truth, to call the world back to the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, has always sounded strange to ears dulled by compromise. How could a people refuse to conform to the rhythm of the world and still speak of grace? How could they uphold the law and still talk about love? The world doesn't understand that obedience is not bondage. It's freedom dressed in discipline. Grace is not the freedom to do what you want. It's the power to become what you were created to be. Every misunderstood mission faces the temptation to explain itself, to soften its message, so the world can digest it. But truth loses its fire when it's watered down for comfort. God didn't raise up a movement to seek approval. He raised it up to awaken conscience. The mission of those who stand under the banner of the three angels in Revelation 14 is not to entertain, but to warn, not to blend in, but to stand out, not to adjust the message to culture, but to adjust culture to the message. That calling will never be understood by those who chase convenience over conviction. And yet, there is something beautiful in the misunderstanding. Because when the world looks at you and cannot define you, heaven smiles. When people call you legalistic for keeping the commandments, when they call you fanatical for honoring the Sabbath, when they call you judgmental for preaching about sin, remember they said the same things about the prophets, about the apostles, about Christ himself. Misunderstanding is the language of the world. When truth walks by, it is the echo of darkness when light begins to speak. So if you are part of a misunderstood mission, wear it as a crown. Don't apologize for your faithfulness. Don't shrink your light to make others comfortable in their shadows. The same God who called Noah to build an ark in a land without rain is the same God who calls his people today to stand firm in a world without reverence. You may not be understood, but you are known in heaven. You may not be celebrated on earth, but you are written in the Lamb's book of life. The mission may be misunderstood, but it is not forgotten, because when all is said and done, when the noise fades, when opinions fall silent, when truth stands alone, the misunderstood will be revealed as the faithful, and the mission that once seemed foolish will be remembered as the voice of God that called a sleeping world to wake up before the final dawn. The Sabbath that speaks. There is a sound that silence makes when heaven speaks. It is the stillness of the Sabbath, a rhythm written not by man but by the Creator himself. Long before there was a church, before there was sin, before there was a nation or a people, there was a rest. On the seventh day, God finished his work, and instead of commanding another task, he blessed a pause. He sanctified time itself. The Sabbath was not made for ceremonies or systems. It was made for relationship. It was God saying to his creation, "Come and remember where you came from." Yet through the ages, that voice of rest has been drowned out by the noise of ambition, commerce, and compromise. The Sabbath speaks a language the world no longer understands. It whispers to the soul in a way that defies the clock, calling men and women back to the rhythm of divine order. In a culture obsessed with movement, the Sabbath teaches stillness. In an age that measures worth by productivity, the Sabbath reminds us that our value comes from presence, not performance. Every sunset that ushers in that sacred time is a reminder that heaven still rules the calendar. You can ignore it, you can replace it, but you cannot erase it, because the Sabbath is not man's idea, it is God's signature written into time. The world says it doesn't matter which day you worship, but that's not what the Creator said. When he blessed the seventh day, he didn't bless a day, he blessed a day. The Sabbath speaks not just about rest, but about authority. Who has the right to define time, worship, and obedience? The enemy has always tried to counterfeit what God has made sacred, because he knows that obedience is the language of love. When you choose to rest on the day God commanded, you're not just keeping a law, you're keeping a promise. You're declaring to heaven and to earth that your allegiance is to the Creator, not to culture. And this is why the Sabbath is misunderstood. To some, it looks restrictive, but to those who have tasted its presence, it's freedom. It's not about rules, it's about rhythm. It's not about legalism, it's about loyalty. It's the pause that refreshes your spirit, the sanctuary in time that renews your faith. The Sabbath doesn't belong to a denomination or a doctrine. It belongs to God. It speaks across centuries, across languages, across creeds. When the world is weary and restless, the Sabbath still says, "Come unto me and I will give you rest." Every Friday sunset is a divine invitation, a reminder that we are not machines, but miracles. The Sabbath quiets the noise, resets the mind, and draws the heart back to gratitude. It's the day heaven meets earth, when eternity leans close to whisper, "Remember." The world works to forget, but the Sabbath exists to help us remember who we are, who made us, and where we're going. It's a memorial of creation, a sign of redemption, and a prophecy of restoration. One day, when all striving ceases, and every believer enters the eternal rest of God's kingdom, the Sabbath will have spoken its final word, that humanity was never designed to live apart from its Creator. Until that day, every Sabbath stands as a living testimony in time, declaring that God's law still matters, that His covenant still stands, and that His people still listen to His voice, even when the world cannot hear it. So listen closely. The Sabbath still speaks. It speaks through sunsets and silence, through obedience and peace, through faith and love. It tells you that you are not forgotten, that creation is still sacred, and that the God who rested is still reigning. The world may rush past it, but those who pause to hear it find what the world is still searching for, the peace that only the Creator can give, the prophecy they don't want to hear. Prophecy has never been comfortable. It doesn't come to please, it comes to pierce. It doesn't whisper what people want to hear. It declares what heaven must reveal. From the days of Noah to the visions of Daniel, from the scrolls of Revelation to the messages proclaimed today, prophecy has always unsettled the proud and awakened the humble. The world doesn't reject prophecy because it's confusing. It rejects it because it's convicting. It confronts false security. It exposes hidden rebellion. It reveals the plans of God and the schemes of darkness. And when truth collides with deception, misunderstanding is inevitable. The Advent message was born out of prophecy, not human imagination, but divine revelation. Daniel saw the rise and fall of kingdoms, the corruption of religion, and the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom. John on the Isle of Patmos saw beasts, judgments, and angels crying out to a sleeping world, "Fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment has come." These were not symbolic fairy tales. They were warnings wrapped in mercy. But when men love comfort more than conviction, they label prophecy as fanaticism. When the truth cuts too deep, they call it extremism. Yet the same people who dismiss prophecy today will be the first to tremble when its fulfillment unfolds before their eyes. The world doesn't want to hear that Babylon still exists, not as a city, but as a system of confusion that mixes truth with error, faith with compromise, worship with tradition. It doesn't want to hear that there is a mark, a power, and a deception moving beneath the surface of religion and politics. But prophecy exposes what human eyes cannot see. It unmasks the false unity that hides rebellion against God. It reveals that every earthly power, no matter how sophisticated, will bow before the truth of the Lamb. People don't reject prophecy because it's outdated. They reject it because it demands a decision. It forces you to choose between convenience and conviction, between the commandments of men and the commandments of God. To preach prophecy in this age is to walk a narrow road. You'll be mocked for being too serious, ridiculed for being too focused on the end. But prophecy is not about predicting doom. It's about preparing hearts. It is God's mercy in motion, His final call before judgment, His love letter written in warning. Noah didn't build an ark because he wanted attention. He built it because he believed the word of God. The same is true for every voice crying out today, warning the world that the final conflict between truth and deception is near. Every prophecy that has ever been spoken has one purpose: to lead humanity back to obedience. The beasts of Revelation are not there to entertain your imagination. They exist to open your eyes. The timelines of Daniel are not there to spark debate. They are there to confirm that God still controls history. Every number, every vision, every angelic message points to one truth: heaven's clock is still ticking, and time is running out for those who live as though it isn't. So when the world says prophecy doesn't matter, listen to heaven instead, because prophecy is the voice of a patient God saying, "I'm coming soon. Prepare." It is the call to wake up, to turn from deception, to find refuge in truth before the storm breaks. The prophecies they don't want to hear are the very ones they need the most, because when the final trumpet sounds, when every secret is revealed and every kingdom crumbles, those who once mocked the message will remember that they were warned, and those who stood firm, misunderstood, rejected, but faithful, will look up and see that every word of prophecy was not a threat but a promise that truth will stand, that God will reign, and that His word, once ignored, will speak louder than the noise of the world forever. The health message they laughed at Noah when he built the ark. They mocked Daniel when he refused to eat the king's food. And today they laugh again at those who believe that health and holiness walk hand in hand. The health message, often dismissed as strange or unnecessary, is not about diets or trends. It is about alignment. Aligning the body, mind, and spirit with the order of heaven. God never separated physical strength from spiritual strength. He created both to work together. to serve as instruments of His glory. And yet, in a world addicted to indulgence, the message of self-control sounds foolish. The human body was designed to be a temple, not a trash bin. Every heartbeat is a sermon, every breath a reminder that life itself is sacred. But the world, blinded by appetite, has forgotten that how we treat this temple affects how we hear God. A cluttered body leads to a clouded mind, and a clouded mind cannot discern the whisper of the Spirit. When you fill your system with what poisons, dulls, and destroys, you close the door to divine clarity. The health message isn't about restriction, it's about restoration. It's about bringing the temple back to its original glory, where every cell, every organ, every thought serves the Creator who made it. When Daniel refused the delicacies of Babylon, he wasn't being picky, he was being prophetic. He understood that food is not neutral, it carries influence. What you consume either sharpens your discernment or weakens your resistance. Babylon has always offered feasts that dull spiritual senses, pleasures that satisfy the flesh but starve the soul. And every generation faces the same test. Will we eat from the table of compromise or the table of conviction? The world may laugh at those who choose purity over pleasure, but heaven smiles. For those who guard the temple are preparing for a greater work, to stand when others fall, to hear when others are deaf to truth. God's health message was never meant to be a burden. It was meant to free His people from bondage, from disease, from addiction, from spiritual lethargy. He gave natural laws not as chains but as channels of life. Every law of health is an invitation to experience more of Him, to rest when He says rest, to eat what He created, not what man manufactured, to move, breathe, and live in harmony with creation. The enemy knows that a tired, toxic, and sick people cannot carry a powerful message. That's why he fights the body as fiercely as he fights the soul, because a dull body makes a dull believer. The world laughs because it cannot see the connection between discipline and destiny. They call it extreme to refuse what everyone else enjoys. But the truth is, every great move of God required consecration. You cannot pray for power while living in pollution. You cannot ask for spiritual fire while feeding the flesh with ashes. The health message is not about what you can't do. It's about who you can become when you let God rule over every part of your being. When the Spirit truly reigns, even your appetite bows in obedience. So let them laugh, let them misunderstand, because one day the difference will show. While the world grows weaker in indulgence, those who honor God's design will rise in strength, clear in mind, strong in body, pure in heart. They will stand as living testimonies that obedience is life, and that holiness is health. The health message they mock today will be the survival message of tomorrow. And those who once laughed will look upon the faithful and see that God was never trying to take pleasure from them. He was trying to give them power, the power to live, to think, to stand, and to finish the work He began. The message of judgment and grace. Judgment, the very word, makes people uncomfortable. It sounds harsh, final, unyielding. The world would rather hear about blessings than accountability, mercy without justice, grace without truth. But the message of judgment and grace is not meant to frighten the faithful. It is meant to awaken the careless. Judgment is not God's anger unleashed. It is His mercy revealed in order. It is heaven's declaration that sin will not reign forever, that suffering will not continue without end, and that righteousness will one day have the final word. The same hand that writes judgment also extends grace, and both are born of love. Long before courts and gavel sounds, there was a sanctuary, a heavenly pattern that revealed how God deals with sin. Every sacrifice, every offering, every drop of blood in the Old Testament pointed to a greater reality, that judgment begins with mercy. Before God condemns, He intercedes. Before He separates, He saves. In that sacred space between guilt and grace stands the high priest, Christ Himself, carrying the record of humanity's rebellion, pleading not for vengeance, but for restoration. Judgment in heaven's language is not a search for reasons to punish, but a process to vindicate truth and redeem the faithful. The world sees judgment as terror, but the believer sees it as hope. It means that every injustice will be answered, every tear will be counted, every lie will be exposed, and every faithful soul will be cleared of accusation. It means that sin has an expiration date. When you understand that, judgment no longer feels like fear, it feels like freedom. The books are opened not to embarrass the righteous, but to silence the accuser. The blood of Christ doesn't hide sin, it removes it. Grace doesn't cancel judgment, it prepares you for it. The cross and the judgment are not enemies. They are partners in the same plan. The message of the sanctuary and the cleansing of sin reveals a love so deep that God Himself takes the stand for the guilty. Imagine that, the judge stepping down from the throne to become the advocate, to plead for those who rebelled against Him. That is the mystery of grace and judgment. The world can't comprehend it, so it dismisses it. But for the one who knows they have been forgiven much, judgment becomes a song of deliverance. Because when your life is covered by the Lamb, there is no fear in the courtroom of heaven, only gratitude. Still, this message is hard for many to hear. They want salvation without surrender, grace without guidance. But grace that doesn't lead to transformation is counterfeit. God's grace is not a license to sin, it is power to overcome it. And judgment is not a threat, it is the final separation of truth from deception. Together they form the heartbeat of the gospel. Mercy extended, righteousness upheld, love perfected. The same God who invites all to come and reason together will one day say, "It is done." Both statements come from the same voice of love. So do not fear the word judgment. Fear only living without grace. The courtroom of heaven is not a place of dread for those who walk with the advocate. It's the moment of vindication for every believer who stood firm when misunderstood, who remained faithful when the world mocked. Judgment means that truth wins. Grace means that you get to be part of that victory. One reveals God's justice, the other reveals His mercy. Together they tell the story of a love so perfect, it refuses to overlook sin, it removes it. In the end, the message of judgment and grace is not about wrath, it's about restoration. It is God setting the record straight, not just about the world, but about His own character. The one who sits on the throne is not eager to destroy, but determined to heal. And when the final verdict is spoken, every voice in heaven and earth will know the judge is righteous, the advocate victorious, and the redeemed forever free.